Berlin. June 14, 1944. 11:42 p.m. Dr. Ingrid Hartmann stands alone in Laboratory 7 of the Reich Ministry of Aviation Research Facility in Tempelhof. The room is cold, despite the summer night. Fluorescent tubes hum overhead, casting harsh shadows across metal workbenches, cluttered with blueprints, calipers and fragments of turbine blades. Outside, air raid sirens wail in the distance. Not close enough to warrant evacuation, close enough to remind everyone that the war has come home. Ingrid does not look up. She has become fluent in the language of sirens, able to distinguish proximity by pitch and duration. These are 5 kilometers away, maybe 6. She has time to finish her calculations. On the desk before her lies a technical report marked Geheim, Secret, dated June 10th. It concerns metallurgical analysis of a new nickel-chromium alloy designated TK100 and 7, developed for turbine blades in the Jumo 004 jet engine. The engine powers the Messerschmitt Me 262, Germany's first operational jet fighter. The Me 262 is faster than any Allied aircraft in service. It is a miracle weapon, a Wunderwaffe. It is also deeply flawed. The turbine blades fail after approximately 25 hours of operation, far below the minimum threshold for combat effectiveness. Ingrid's job is to determine why. She has spent 3 weeks analyzing blade samples, examining fracture patterns under electron microscopy, testing heat tolerance at temperatures exceeding 1000 degrees Celsius. Her conclusion is precise and unambiguous. The alloy composition is incorrect. The ratio of chromium to nickel is inverted from optimal specifications, resulting in premature metal fatigue under high-temperature stress. The error is not a design flaw. It is a production error. Someone at the Krupp manufacturing facility in Essen has misread or misapplied the formula. The mistake is fixable, but fixing it requires acknowledging the mistake, halting production, retraining workers, and scrapping thousands of already manufactured blades. In June 1944, with Allied bombers striking German industrial centers, nightly and the Eastern Front collapsing, such delays are politically unacceptable. Ingrid completes her report at 11:58 p.m. She documents the alloy deficiency, provides comparative analysis against British Rolls-Royce turbine metallurgy captured from a downed RAF aircraft, and recommends immediate suspension of TK107 production pending correction. She signs the report with her full credentials: Dr. Ingrid Hartmann, Diplom-Ingenieur, Technische Universität Berlin, 1936. She places it in the outgoing secure file for review by senior engineering staff. She does not know that her report will never reach them. She does not know that within 48 hours the report will be in Allied hands. She does not know that her meticulous documentation of Germany's jet engine weakness will give the British and Americans the exact information they need to neutralize the one weapon that might have prolonged the war. What she knows is that she is tired, that the sirens have stopped, and that tomorrow she will begin analysis on another failed component. She turns off the laboratory lights and walks home through blacked-out streets past bombed buildings and exhausted citizens, unaware that she has just altered the course of history. Ingrid Hartmann was born in Dresden on March 3, 1912, the only daughter of a secondary school mathematics teacher and a piano instructor. Her childhood was defined by precision and discipline. Her father taught her geometry at age 6, calculus at 12. Her mother insisted on musical training, believing that mathematics, without art, produced cold technicians rather than complete thinkers. Ingrid excelled at both but preferred the certainty of numbers. Music was interpretation, mathematics was truth. At 15, she informed her parents she would study engineering. Her father supported the decision. Her mother worried. Engineering was not considered appropriate for women, particularly in Weimar Germany, where social conservatism remained entrenched despite political upheaval. Ingrid enrolled at Technische Universität Berlin in 1931. Of 7 women, in a class of 240 engineering students. She studied mechanical engineering with specialization in materials science. Her professors were skeptical. Engineering required physical strength for laboratory work, they argued. It required spatial reasoning that women supposedly lacked. Ingrid responded by ranking third in her class after the first year, second after the second year, and first in her final examinations. She completed her diploma in 1936, with a thesis on stress analysis in aircraft wing structures. Her thesis advisor, Professor Klaus Becker, recommended her for doctoral studies. She declined. The political environment had changed. The National Socialists had come to power in 1933. By 1936, their ideology of Kinder, Küche, Kirche, children, kitchen, church, defined acceptable roles for women. Female engineers were ideological contradictions. Ingrid found employment at Henschel & Son in Kassel, a firm manufacturing locomotives and industrial machinery. She worked in quality control, inspecting welds and stress testing metal components. The work was beneath her qualifications, but represented one of the few positions available to a woman with engineering credentials. She remained at Henschel until 1939. When war began in September, German industry was mobilized for military production. Henschel shifted to manufacturing tanks and armored vehicles. Skilled engineers became scarce as men were conscripted. Ideological purity became secondary to practical necessity. In 1940, Ingrid was transferred to the Ministry of Aviation, Research in Berlin, assigned to the Aeronautical Materials Division. Her expertise in metallurgy and stress analysis made her valuable despite her gender. She was paid 70% of what male engineers with equivalent qualifications received. She did not complain. Complaining accomplished nothing. By 1944, the Reich Ministry of Aviation Research had become the center of Germany's desperate attempt to develop weapons capable of reversing the war's trajectory. Allied bombing had devastated industrial capacity. The Eastern Front consumed men and materiel at unsustainable rates. The Western Allies were preparing for invasion across the Channel. Germany's only hope lay in technological breakthrough. Jet aircraft, ballistic missiles, advanced submarines, weapons so superior that numerical disadvantage became irrelevant. The Me-262 jet fighter represented that hope. It flew at 860 km per hour, 200 km faster than the fastest Allied fighters. It could intercept bomber formations before escort fighters could respond. It could change the air war. But only if it worked reliably. Ingrid's role was solving the reliability problem. She analyzed failures, identified weaknesses, recommended corrections. She worked 12-hour days, 6 days per week. She reported to Oberingenieur Friedrich Helm, a career aviation engineer, who tolerated her presence, but never consulted her opinion on matters beyond her specific technical assignments. Helm believed women lacked the strategic vision necessary for high-level engineering decisions. He accepted her analyses when they confirmed his conclusions, and ignored them when they did not. In early June 1944, Helm had committed to accelerating Me-262 production despite ongoing turbine blade failures. His reasoning was simple. Operational jets with short lifespans were better than no jets at all. Ingrid's report contradicting that assessment was inconvenient. It would not be forwarded to higher authority. June 16, 1944, 14:30. Ingrid is summoned to Helm's office. The office is small and cluttered, dominated by a large map of Germany, marked with red pins indicating bombed industrial sites. Helm sits behind a metal desk reviewing production schedules. He does not look up when Ingrid enters. He informs her that her metallurgical report has been received and reviewed. He informs her that senior engineering staff have determined that the TK-107 alloy meets acceptable operational standards despite minor performance limitations. He informs her that production will continue as scheduled. Ingrid asks if her recommendation for formula correction has been considered. Helm says it has been considered, and rejected. The war does not allow time for perfectionism. Ingrid asks if the blade failure rate has been calculated in terms of pilot safety and aircraft loss. Helm says pilot safety is an operational concern, not an engineering concern. The meeting ends after 6 minutes. Ingrid returns to Laboratory 7. She files her report in her personal records and begins work on the next assignment, Analysis of fuel pump seals. She has learned not to argue. Arguing damages reputation without changing outcomes. Female engineers who argued were reassigned to clerical positions or dismissed entirely. Ingrid had survived 4 years in the ministry by being competent, quiet, and politically invisible. She would continue surviving the same way. But what she does not know, what no one in the ministry knows, is that the Reich security apparatus is collapsing faster than the military front. Counterintelligence has been compromised. Resistance networks operate inside government facilities. And one of those networks has been watching Laboratory 7. The man's name is never recorded. He worked as a custodial supervisor in the Tempelhof research complex. He had access to offices, laboratories and filing rooms. He emptied trash bins and cleaned floors, and observed which documents were marked secret, and which were marked for destruction. He was part of a network that the Gestapo would later designate the Red Orchestra. Though the designation was inaccurate and the network's actual structure was never fully understood, what mattered was that he had contacts outside Germany and methods for transmitting documents. On the night of June 16, while cleaning Laboratory 7, he found Ingrid's metallurgical report in the outgoing file. The report had not yet been collected for internal review. He photographed it using a miniature camera concealed in a flashlight casing. The photographs were developed the following day. The report was transmitted to a Swedish intermediary on June 18. It reached British intelligence in London on June 22. The British had been studying the Me-262 since April, when the first reconnaissance photographs showed the aircraft at Lechfeld airfield near Munich. They knew it was fast. They did not know if it was reliable. Intelligence reports were contradictory. Some suggested the jet was already operational in significant numbers. Others suggested it remained experimental and plagued by mechanical failures. Ingrid's report resolved the uncertainty. It provided exact specifications of the turbine alloy deficiency, documented failure rates, and confirmed that Germany lacked the industrial capacity to correct the problem quickly. More importantly, it gave the Allies tactical guidance. Me-262 seconds could be engaged most effectively during takeoff and landing, when their speed advantage was negated. Their operational range was limited by engine reliability to approximately 60 minutes of flight time. Intercepting them required avoiding direct pursuit, and instead targeting their vulnerable approach patterns. June 25, 1944. RAF Fighter Command receives a technical briefing based on Ingrid's report. Squadron leaders are instructed to modify engagement tactics against jet aircraft. Instead of pursuing jets at high altitude where speed differential is overwhelming, RAF pilots are directed to patrol near known Luftwaffe air bases, and engage during takeoff and landing sequences. American 8th Air Force receives similar guidance. The new tactics are implemented immediately. Within 2 weeks, Me-262 losses increased dramatically. German pilots report that Allied fighters are waiting at airfield perimeters, striking during the aircraft's most vulnerable phase of operation. The tactical advantage of speed is negated by operational predictability. July 18, 1944. 7:15, Lieutenant Franz Schall, an experienced Luftwaffe pilot, is taking off from Achmer Airfield in an Me-262 when his starboard engine fails 30 seconds after liftoff. The aircraft rolls uncontrollably and crashes into a forest 2 kilometers from the runway. Schall is killed instantly. Post-crash analysis confirms turbine blade failure due to metallurgical deficiency. The report is filed with dozens of similar incident reports. No corrective action is taken. Production continues. By August, the Me-262 operational loss rate, due to mechanical failure, exceeds the combat loss rate. The miracle weapon is destroying itself. Ingrid knows nothing of this. She continues working in Laboratory 7, analyzing components, writing reports that are filed and forgotten. In late July, she is reassigned to structural analysis of V-2 rocket fuselage materials. The rocket program is even more dysfunctional than the jet program, consuming vast resources while producing negligible military impact. Ingrid documents stress fractures and welding deficiencies, and watches her reports disappear into bureaucratic voids. By August, Allied forces have broken out of Normandy and are advancing toward Germany. Soviet forces are approaching from the east. The Ministry of Aviation Research begins relocating critical personnel to facilities outside Berlin. Ingrid is not considered critical personnel. She remains in Berlin. September 1944. The British Air Ministry publishes an internal assessment of German jet aircraft capabilities. The assessment, classified secret and restricted to senior command staff, credits signals intelligence and technical analysis for accurate understanding of Me-262 vulnerabilities. No mention is made of the source document. Ingrid's report exists in British files as document reference G47, Jet Turbine Metallurgy, origin unattributed. The custodial supervisor who photographed the report is arrested by the Gestapo in October 1944 during a broader sweep of suspected resistance members. He is interrogated for 3 weeks at Prinz Albrechtstrasse headquarters. He reveals nothing about his network or methods. He is executed on November 7, 1944. His name was Heinrich Vogel. That detail emerges only decades later, when East German archives are opened after reunification. November 1944. Berlin is being bombed nightly. The Ministry of Aviation research facility in Tempelhof is struck on November 22. Laboratory 7 is destroyed. Ingrid is not present during the attack. She is at her apartment, 3 kilometers away. The following morning, she reports to the damaged facility, and is informed that all personnel are being evacuated to secondary locations. She is assigned to a research station in Thuringia, a forested region, in central Germany still beyond the range of Allied ground forces. She travels by rail through devastated countryside, past burned cities and columns of refugees. The research station is a converted agricultural warehouse with minimal equipment, and no functional laboratory facilities. There is no work to do. Ingrid spends the winter of 1944 to 1945 in Thuringia, with 24 other displaced engineers and scientists, waiting for the war to end. April 1945. American forces reach Thuringia. The research station is occupied without resistance. Ingrid and the other personnel are processed as displaced persons and interrogated by American technical intelligence teams seeking information about advanced weapons programs. Ingrid describes her work on turbine metallurgy and structural analysis. The interrogating officer shows polite interest but takes minimal notes. She is not considered a priority intelligence asset. She has no knowledge of nuclear research, V2 guidance systems or other high-value technologies. She is released after 2 days, and directed to a displaced persons camp near Weimar. She remains there for 6 months, while Allied authorities process millions of refugees, POWs, and displaced civilians. October 1945. Ingrid returns to Dresden. The city she left in 1930 no longer exists. The February 1945 firebombing destroyed the historic center and killed tens of thousands. Her parents' apartment building is rubble. She learns from surviving neighbors that her father was killed during the raids and her mother died of pneumonia the following month. Ingrid finds temporary housing in a partially intact building on the city's outskirts. She searches for employment, but there is no employment. The economy has collapsed. Industrial facilities are being dismantled by Soviet occupation forces and shipped east as reparations. Engineering work does not exist. In 1946, Ingrid is offered a position at a Soviet-administered technical institute in Dresden, teaching basic engineering principles to students who had missed years of education during the war. She accepts. The position provides minimal salary and a ration card. She teaches for 3 years. In 1949, the German Democratic Republic is established. The Technical Institute is renamed and reorganized under the new government's education ministry. Ingrid continues teaching. Her students are mostly men who had been too young to fight but were now training for reconstruction work. She teaches them stress analysis, materials science, and basic metallurgy. She does not mention the war. No one mentions the war. 1950s. Ingrid's life achieves a routine stability. She teaches. She publishes occasional technical papers in East German engineering journals on metallurgical fatigue and fracture mechanics. The papers are competent, but not groundbreaking. She never marries. She lives alone in a small apartment near the Technical Institute. Colleagues describe her as reserved, precise and slightly detached. Students find her lectures clear but impersonal. She does not socialize. She attends faculty meetings when required, and leaves immediately afterward. She builds no close friendships. She seems to exist at a slight distance from normal social engagement, as though some part of her remained in the cold fluorescent light of Laboratory 7 in 1944. December 1962. A British military historian named David Ashworth is researching Allied air superiority strategies during the final year of the war. He is examining declassified intelligence files at the National Archives when he encounters document reference G47 jet turbine metallurgy. The document is a photographed German technical report on jet engine turbine blade failures. The report is extraordinarily detailed, providing exact metallurgical specifications and failure analysis. Ashworth recognizes that the information would have been invaluable for tactical planning against Me-262 aircraft. He searches for attribution. The file indicates the document was received via intelligence channels in June 1944, but provides no source identification. Ashworth notes the document in his research, but cannot determine its origin. 1970s. Ingrid retires from teaching at age 63. She receives a modest state pension. She continues living in Dresden. She reads technical journals, and occasionally attends lectures at the Technical Institute. Her health declines slowly. By 1978, she requires assistance with daily activities. She is moved to a state-run care facility for elderly citizens. The facility is institutional and depressing but adequately staffed. Ingrid spends her days in a shared room with 3 other elderly women, none of whom she forms meaningful connections with. She dies in her sleep on January 19, 1981, age 68. Her obituary in the local newspaper is 3 sentences long. Dr. Ingrid Hartmann, retired engineering instructor, died January 19. She taught at the Dresden Technical Institute for 30 years. Services will be private. Her personal effects are sorted by facility staff. There are no family members to claim them. The belongings are minimal. Clothing, a few books, a box of faded photographs showing a younger woman in various academic settings, a folder containing her university diploma, and several published technical papers. No letters, no journals, no documents relating to her wartime work. Everything is donated to charity or discarded. The possibility that this woman had contributed to Allied victory in World War II never occurs to anyone sorting through her belongings. She was simply an elderly East German woman who had taught engineering and died alone. The Berlin Wall falls. Archives in East Germany become accessible to Western researchers. Over the following decade, historians piece together previously hidden details about German weapons programs, resistance networks, and intelligence operations during the war. In 1997, a German researcher named Matthias Bern is investigating the Red Orchestra resistance network. He finds references in Stasi files to Heinrich Vogel, the custodial supervisor executed in 1944. The files mention that Vogel photographed technical documents from the Tempelhof Aviation Research Facility. Bern cross-references with British intelligence records that had been further declassified in the 1990s. He identifies document reference G47 as likely originating from Vogel's network, but the document itself provides no indication of who authored it. David Ashworth, now retired, is contacted by Matthias Bern regarding the turbine metallurgy report. Ashworth has kept notes from his 1962 research. He suggests checking the original photograph document for signatures or identifying marks. Bern requests access to the physical file at the British National Archives. The request takes 18 months to process. In 2005, Bern is finally permitted to examine the original photographed pages. On the final page, barely visible in the photograph's margin, is a signature. Dr. Ingrid Hartmann, Diplom-Ingenieur. Bern spends 2 years tracking the name through German wartime personnel records, university archives, and post-war documentation. He finds her employment records at the Ministry of Aviation Research. He finds her teaching position in Dresden. He finds her death certificate from 1981. In 2008, Byrne publishes a paper in the Journal of Intelligence History titled, Unintentional Intelligence: How a German Engineer's Technical Report Influenced Allied Air Tactics in 1944. The paper documents Ingrid's report, its transmission to British intelligence, and its tactical impact on Me-262 engagement strategies. The paper receives modest attention in academic circles but no broader public recognition. Ingrid Hartmann remains unknown outside a small community of intelligence historians. There are no photographs of her in the archives, no surviving colleagues who remember her, no students who stayed in contact. She exists as a name on documents and a brief biographical sketch assembled from institutional records. The irony is absolute. Ingrid Hartmann wrote a technical report documenting a metallurgical deficiency in German jet engines. She did so competently and precisely. She expected the report would be used to correct the deficiency and improve the weapon. Instead, the report was ignored by German authorities, stolen by a resistance member, transmitted to Allied intelligence, and used to neutralize the very weapon she was trying to improve. Her expertise made the report valuable. Her gender made her invisible within the German system, which meant her work was overlooked and vulnerable to exploitation. The very marginalization that limited her career enabled her accidental contribution to Allied victory. She never knew. She lived 36 years after the war, and never learned that her metallurgical analysis had influenced tactical decisions that cost German lives and prolonged Allied air superiority. She never knew that British and American pilots engaged Me-262 seconds, using tactics derived from her documentation of turbine blade failure patterns. She never knew that Heinrich Vogel had photographed her report and died protecting the network that transmitted it. She never received recognition or thanks or acknowledgement. She taught engineering to students in Dresden and retired, and died in a care facility and was forgotten. This is not a story of deliberate heroism. Ingrid did not sabotage the German war effort. She did not join the resistance. She did not risk her life to aid the Allies. She simply wrote an accurate technical report documenting a real problem. The report was intended to help Germany. It helped Germany's enemies instead. The difference between those outcomes was determined entirely by who had access to the report, and how they chose to use it. Ingrid had no control over that. She was a materials engineer, analyzing turbine failures. What happened to her analysis afterward was beyond her knowledge or influence. Yet the impact was measurable. The Me-262 could have been a significantly more effective weapon if deployed earlier, and in greater numbers with reliable engines. Production delays caused by metallurgical problems and tactical vulnerabilities exploited. Through Allied knowledge of those problems reduced the aircraft's strategic impact. How many Allied bombers were not shot down because Me-262 seconds failed mechanically, or were intercepted during vulnerable takeoff phases is impossible to calculate precisely, but the number was not zero. Lives were saved because Ingrid Hartmann documented a turbine blade deficiency with scientific precision. And that documentation reached people who could exploit the weakness rather than correct it. She would have been horrified. She was a German engineer working for the German government during a war. She believed she was contributing to her country's defense. She had no sympathy for the Allied cause. She was not secretly hoping Germany would lose. She was simply trying to solve a technical problem. That her solution instead revealed a vulnerability was an accident of circumstances entirely beyond her control. The custodial supervisor who photographed her report made the decision that changed its purpose. British intelligence analysts made the tactical recommendations based on her data. RAF pilots implemented those tactics. None of them consulted Ingrid. None of them needed to. The report existed. They used it. That was sufficient. This is how intelligence work often functioned during the war, not through elaborate spy networks and dramatic betrayals, though those existed, but through mundane access to valuable information, and opportunistic exploitation of that access. Documents were everywhere in wartime bureaucracies. Reports on weapons performance, production schedules, resource allocations, strategic planning. Most were filed and forgotten. Some fell into the wrong hands through carelessness or deliberate action. by low-level personnel whose names never appeared in intelligence files. Those documents often proved more valuable than information from trained agents because they were authentic, detailed and prepared for internal use, rather than external deception. Ingrid's report was exactly that kind of document. It was not propaganda. It was not intentionally misleading. It was a straightforward engineering analysis prepared for German engineers trying to improve a German weapon. That authenticity made it invaluable to the Allies. They could trust its accuracy because it was never meant for them to see. Ingrid's reputation for precision, and her signature on the document, verified its legitimacy. British intelligence had no reason to doubt the metallurgical analysis or the documented failure rates. The report was what it claimed to be. That made it weaponizable in ways that deliberately planted intelligence never could be. The broader lesson concerns the role of accidental contributions to historical outcomes. History is taught as a sequence of deliberate decisions made by important people. Leaders make plans. Generals command armies. Scientists develop weapons. Spies steal secrets. That narrative is not false, but it is radically incomplete. Beneath the surface of deliberate action is a vast substrate of accidents, mistakes, oversights, and unintended consequences that shape outcomes as much as any planned strategy. Ingrid Hartmann was part of that substrate. She did her job competently. Her work was ignored by her superiors. A custodial worker photographed it. It reached the enemy. They used it effectively. None of that was planned. None of it resulted from a conspiracy or a carefully orchestrated operation. It simply happened. How many other similar accidents occurred during the war? How many technical reports or operational plans or logistical schedules ended up in the wrong hands through carelessness or opportunism or simple bad luck? How many German advantages were nullified because someone left a document on a desk or threw a draft in a trash bin that was emptied by someone working for the other side? The intelligence archives are full of references to captured documents and intercepted communications, but the mundane mechanisms by which those documents were captured, or communications intercepted, are rarely documented in detail. They worked for the resistance, or they found an opportunity, or they were in the right place at the right time. The specifics are lost. Ingrid Hartmann's specifics survived only because a researcher in 2005 noticed a signature on a photograph document and spent years tracking down who that signature belonged to. Without that effort, she would have remained anonymous. Document reference G47 would still exist in the archives, but no one would know who wrote it, or under what circumstances. The intelligence would still have influence tactics, but the human source would be completely invisible. That invisibility was the norm, not the exception. Most intelligence sources were never identified. Most contributions were never attributed. The work mattered. The people who did the work disappeared. Perhaps that is appropriate. Intelligence work requires anonymity. Sources who are publicly identified become useless or dead. The system protects itself by erasing individuals. But after the war, after the operations are long finished and the participants are dead, that erasure persists for bureaucratic rather than operational reasons. Files remain classified decades beyond necessity. Names are redacted from documents that no longer pose security risks. Researchers face obstacles accessing materials that could illuminate historical understanding without compromising current methods. The result is a historical record that emphasizes the visible and documented, while systematically excluding the invisible and forgotten. Ingrid Hartmann was invisible by design. She was a woman, in a male-dominated field, which made her work undervalued and easily overlooked. She was a technical specialist rather than a strategic decision-maker, which meant her contributions were invisible to those above her in the hierarchy. She was German, which meant her accidental aid to the Allies could never be acknowledged or celebrated, because it contradicted the narrative of German resistance being either heroic anti-Nazi activism, or total complicity with the regime. She fit neither category. She was an engineer who did her job competently, and whose work had consequences she never intended and never knew about. Her life after the war reflects that invisibility. She taught. She retired. She died. No recognition. No decorations. No acknowledgement. She was simply an elderly woman who had once been an engineer. The war was not discussed in East Germany, except in officially sanctioned narratives that emphasized Soviet liberation and anti-fascist resistance. Ingrid participated in neither. She had worked for the Nazi government. That made her politically suspect regardless of what her work had actually accomplished. Better to remain silent. Better to teach engineering and avoid discussing the past. Better to die quietly without drawing attention. The rediscovery of her story in the 2000s came too late for any personal recognition. She had been dead for 24 years when Matthias Bern identified her as the author of document reference G47. There was no one to inform, no family, no surviving colleagues, just a name in archives and a brief biographical sketch. The academic paper documenting her contribution was published. A few historians noted it. The broader public remained unaware. Ingrid Hartmann is not commemorated. There are no plaques or monuments. Her name does not appear in museums or textbooks. She remains what she always was: invisible. But the turbine blades failed. The Me-262 seconds crashed or were shot down during takeoff. Allied pilots knew where to wait and when to strike. The jet program that might have changed the air war instead became another German technological dead end, impressive on paper but operationally ineffective. Part of that failure traced directly to the metallurgical deficiency Ingrid documented, and the Allied exploitation of that documentation. Her precision as an engineer made the report valuable. Her invisibility as a woman made it vulnerable. The combination changed outcomes. History remembered the generals and the strategists and the pilots who flew the missions. It did not remember the woman who analyzed the turbine blades and wrote the report that made those missions more effective. But she was there. Her work mattered. The silence does not erase that. It only makes it harder to see. In the archives at Kew, document reference G47 still exists. Photographed pages showing metallurgical analysis and failure data, slightly blurred from being copied under difficult conditions by a man who would be executed for taking that photograph. On the final page, barely legible, a signature. Dr. Ingrid Hartmann, Diplom Ingenieur. A name that meant nothing to British intelligence analysts in 1944. A name that means nothing to most people today, but a name attached to work that influenced a war and saved lives, and demonstrated that the most significant contributions to history are often made by people no one remembers making them. The war ended in 1945. The recognition came 63 years later. Too late to matter to the person who deserved it. Late enough that the only audience was academic historians and intelligence researchers who appreciate such details. The broader story of World War II continues to be told without her. The Me-262 is still described as a fearsome weapon that came too late. The Allied air campaign is still credited to brave pilots and skilled strategists. The technical intelligence that enabled tactical advantages is mentioned generically, without reference to sources. Ingrid Hartmann remains invisible. But the document exists. The signature exists. The evidence exists. And sometimes that has to be enough.